But strictly speaking, the term selvage for years was used to refer to the bit of writing or excess on the edge of wallpaper that, as it came delivered, that excess had to be trimmed off. Nowadays, I use table trimming. Well, let's say I use it a lot more than I did in the past 20 years when those handprints were going out of style. Nowadays, you run into these modern things, like this picture is a Philip Jeffries jute, I believe, or hemp, with these rivets. And you can't double cut this on the wall because the rivets, if you should happen to hit one with your blade, you've ruined the cut. Here's the 6-foot brass bound straight edge that I use. You've seen it in an earlier segment in this video course. Here's an old trick I've seen some paper hangers use. They use their single edge blade as a measuring device, and it has a definite lengthwise and widthwise dimension. So instead of taking out their ruler each time to check to see if they've got the correct distance from the edge of the material to the edge of the straight edge, they just move the blade along and adjust the straight edge accordingly. Other candidates for double cutting on the wall that you never can do as well are metallics, foils. They just do not butt. You need a perfect butt, and the only way you can get a perfect butt is with a double cut. But as I say, with the boga strip, you got to protect the wall. Otherwise, that perfect seam is going to look terrible in about 6 months to a year. Many days on the job you'll find little annoyances, and sometimes these annoyances can be very large affairs because there's a defect in the paper or there are little bits of color dropout, God knows what. But it's making the paper look bad because there are these imperfections, and sometimes you have a paper that will show these imperfections from 5 feet away. And by the way, the general rule is if you can see something from 5 feet away, it's bad. So, what do? Well, if you've measured the room closely, not leaving a lot of room for extra or no room for defects, you're either going to have to find a way to cover up these defects, or a touch-up, as I say, or you're going to have to quit for the day. Pack up your equipment, leave, lose a day's pay, tell the customer to reorder the paper, and by the way, a lot of times when they do reorder and a new shipment comes in, it has the exact same problem as the old shipment. You can see that by the white of the window frame, there is a problem. Either the paper hanger hiccuped and caused the blade to jump a little bit, and now you see this white spot where you really don't want to see that, or there may be something wrong with the building in this particular spot where you saw very early on in the basic cutting technique, I had a baseboard that had all sorts of crap that was loaded right where the baseboard met the wall. Here's an assortment of various artists' media that I use not every day, but when I need a certain type of look to match the appearance of color on the wallpaper, I use different types of art media. There are a lot of materials nowadays that have some sort of pearlescent or metallic sheen to them, which bounces the light back and reflects it. There's a lot of confusion out there about the use of tinted primers as a preparation for wall covering. You'll come to a job and the customer says, don't worry, I had the painter prime the wall with a dark burgundy if you're hanging a dark burgundy paper, and they think that this is the way you handle whiteness at the seams in case there's any seam splitting, that the color underneath will show through and you won't show white. I'm not really a big fan of this method. Overall, it looks very blotchy. Here you can see what I mean. I took a white piece of paper and put a large X in blue, dark blue masking tape, and I have a white non-woven paper. And as you can see, as I overlay the paper, you can see that blue X peeking through. So in a case of a white paper or a very light paper where you have a wall that is painted dark, you don't want to use a clear wall covering primer or prep coat. Sometimes you'll be asked to do a repair on a wallpaper, as is shown here. This is a simulation of what happens when someone changes out a thermostat that somebody cut around when they installed the wallpaper. But you'll run into these kinds of necessities when the movers were bringing a bed frame up the two-story hallway and gouged the wallpaper halfway going up, or other instances where you're on a job site and another contractor who's working there has damaged your wallpaper. And once it's in, you'll see that it makes a pretty good repair. Now, if you've got a material that is, let's say, a thicker commercial vinyl or just anything that has a curl to it, you'd want to be using a heat gun set on low to make sure there was no little bit of edge curl that would show the location of this repair. After it's all done and smoothed down with a spackle knife, you see that a paper like this repairs very well. It is, for all intents and purposes, an invisible repair. And you'll go in and see something like this where in a bathroom, high moisture in the air has caused this paper-backed vinyl to curl up at the seam, and there is a way that you can get those edges down. Now, I see a lot of paper hangers like to use something like vinyl over vinyl adhesive for a repair like this, but I don't. And before you go out to do any bathroom, you need to have a full set of Allen wrenches, because you'll find that most of the towel racks or toilet paper holders use the Allen set screw. You'll find that older fixtures will use a very tiny regular slotted screwdriver, so get a small screwdriver that would fit into the recess that that screw would fit into for the set screw. You'll find that medicine cabinets in bathrooms are pretty easy to remove most of the time, and it is worth the extra time to remove them because the job comes out better. Now here's a type of towel rack that you see frequently in houses that were built before 1960 in the United States. And they are set in plaster. They are not removable. Place down and rinse it well. If you don't do that, you will have a situation where a primer may not stick to grease, because if you read the label of any primer, it says walls must be clean, dry, and sound. And the walls are not clean when there's a greasy film of grease on there. So you wash it down, let it dry completely, and then put your primer on there. One thing you should use to clean the wall is a detergent, not TSP or trisodium phosphate. Sometimes you get into older buildings like this, and the corner bead that is used to make a sharp corner with the sheetrock is made of an, let's say, a non-rust resistant metal. Every so often, someone will come to you and say, can you put wallpaper over plywood or wood paneling or something newer that's called MDF in the United States. Originally, I wasn't going to include this section because the use of borders has been drastically curtailed in the past, let's say, 10 years. In the 1990s, borders were everywhere. To prepare for the inlaid border is to lay out exactly the height that the border is going to be, and then leave myself excess for the top paper and for the bottom paper, because those are areas that are going to be double cut. Okay. When you're doing these jobs, when you've completed these types of jobs, bring a camera and bring some lights and take some photos, high resolution photos of what you've done, and then you'll start to build a portfolio. You'll have photos that you can take to people and say, this is what I did, this is another project that I was on, and they look at it. And the great thing about photography is it doesn't really show any of, let's say you didn't trim properly this much or something like that. It doesn't really show it in the photograph. So make sure you've got a well-lit photograph, high resolution, and you can have that under your belt. Now, once you have photos of your work, then you can do what I strongly suggest you do, which is to get a website.